And joining us now to talk about what is transpiring in California and elsewhere is Weatherbell Chief Forecaster Joe Bastardi. Joe, it is an honor to have you along on America's Forum today.
Well, thanks for having me here. First of all, this is not nearly as bad as October of 2007. We had 1,500 homes burned in San Diego County during that fire situation there. And if this were back in 1955, there would be very few homes burned because there wouldn't be homes in the places that are getting burned right now. The fact of the matter is, we have a marked increase in California population since the last climate cycle, similar to this. We've been warning people for the last 10 years that the South and West is going to get very dry overall because the Pacific is flipping into its dry pattern. The type of pattern leads to dry. The Pacific Ocean is cooling. When the Pacific Ocean cools in its tropical areas, much of the western and southern part of the United States becomes drier than normal. The last time we went into a cycle like this was back in the 50s and 60s, but there weren't as many people living in the southern United States or in harm's way for wildfires as there are now. So naturally, that has something to do with it. And a lot of the folks don't understand that this whole thing, if you simply go back and look at weather patterns of the past, it's very similar to that. Now, you come on and you sound cruel and inhuman by saying this isn't as bad as such and such. But the fact is we have to put everything into perspective. And we live in a day and age now where there's all sorts of media hype going on over every small situation. Now, you just mentioned, Morgan, this is one of the worst wildfire seasons ever. Well, the fact of the matter is the wildfire season is just getting underway. It could be like a tornado outbreak that just the entire season falls apart after that. Last year, they did all that hype on those two tornadoes in Oklahoma. I am very sympathetic to people that get hit by tornadoes. They're bullwhips out of the sky. But the fact is we had a record low tornado season last year, a record low or almost record low wildfire season. And so what we're seeing here is a buildup of hyperbole, I should say, over these things. The other problem you have is if you talk to forestry people, I know a lot of forestry people at Penn State, they believe some of our conservation methods are fueling this. We're building houses in places and not chopping down trees and not letting nature take its course the correct way. So what do you think is going to happen? I'll give you another example. We're talking
Well, if I may interrupt
wildfires.
for just a second. The White House released a statement on Tuesday saying that climate change is going to increase erratic and extreme weather. We're going to expect to see more flooding, more wildfires, more droughts. Do you think climate change is to blame for some of this?
Well, first of all, the climate has been changing since the time, whether you believe in evolution or creation. The Earth cannot come up with a perfect climate. Take a look at the way the globe is shaped. 3/4 of the globe in the northern hemisphere is land, 3/4 in the southern hemisphere water. The Earth wobbles on its axis, receives radiation at different angles at different times of the year. There's no perfect climate. Ask these people what the perfect climate is, okay? They don't know. So climate change is redundant. Everybody knows this climate change. They said global warming. And what happened was when that busted, when that forecast began to bust, they said, well, let's change it to climate change, climate disruption. Here's how, I don't want to say it's ignorant, but how they don't understand what they're talking about. It's almost nonsense.
Well, let me go to another factor of weather change, Joe, because we're up against the clock. The fires out in California.
And when the weather starts getting, as they're saying, extreme, there's no increase in extremities. But if it's doing that, it's because the other side is fighting back. You know, if the atmosphere is just stable, one side wins. Well, if it was warming up and now the weather's getting crazier, why do you think that's happening? Because they're bigger and bigger fights with colder and colder air masses starting to reestablish control like in the 60s and 70s.
And
Believe
true
me,
climate change you're talking about. East Coast, a deluge there in that D.C. to New York corridor with all the rain. About a minute left. What's responsible for these patterns?
That's natural. What happens is we've had a warmer than normal Pacific, and the Pacific is now cooling. Believe me, the atmosphere is never stable. It's in constant search of a balance it cannot attain. So because of the magnificent magnitude of the atmosphere, how huge it is, there are going to be times when there's conflict in the atmosphere, causing one type of weather in one place and compensating weather the other way in another place. This has happened all the time. Believe me, if you go back and look at the 30s, 40s, and 50s in this country, you'll find out what extreme was weather-wise.
Joe Bastardi, we appreciate your insights. I hope you'll come back one day as you talk about fires in the West. I have some personal experience representing Arizona in the Congress in those days. But in the meantime, we want to thank you very much in your role as chief forecaster at Weatherbell, offering insight on the weather and the inevitable, quote, change of climates that go on, not quite as catastrophic as some in official Washington would have us believe, but always a cause for concern. Joe, again, great to have you on. We hope you'll come back and visit us again real soon.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Joe Bastardi of Weatherbell. Morgan, it's great to have you along. And your comments. You heard Joe Bastardi talk about weather and the dramatic differences. We'd love to hear from you. Tweet us your comments at Newsmax TV, #America's Forum. We're coming back.